Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan narrowly won a historic referendum on Sunday that will tighten his grip on power. But the knife-edge result left the country bitterly divided and the opposition crying foul. The sweeping constitutional changes approved in the vote create a presidential system that will grant Erdogan more power than any leader since modern Turkey's founder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk and his successor İsmet İnönü. The result could also have even wider implications for Turkey, which joined NATO in 1952 and for the last half-century has set its sights on joining the European Union. So what does the yes vote mean and what are the immediate fallouts of the win for Erdogan? That's what we're going to discuss on this edition of The Big Picture. Joining me on the program today are Sucheta Mahajan, Professor, Center for Historical Studies, JNU, Shashank, former Foreign Secretary, A.K.Ramakrishnan, Professor, Center for West Asian Studies, JNU, and WAIEL Awwad, West Asia expert. Thank you so much to all my guests for joining me on the program. Ambassador, I'd like to begin with you. What does this referendum mean for Erdogan?
Well, Erdogan, as you have said, that will have more powers, more freedom to negotiate with the Europeans and with the other international players. He has played his cards rather well, that when the European Union still had some money available, he got a multi-billion-dollar deal with them in order to send them refugees in a graduated fashion. Now that the Europeans don't want any more refugees, he has also changed track and made friends with the Russians. And in between, I think whatever is going on in Iraq and Syria, I think he's seen as a friend by everyone who can be counted upon to help them stabilize the region in the Middle East.
Professor Ramakrishnan, does this referendum lead to Turkey being more divided on religious grounds in the near future?
This is not fundamentally about religion. It's about the president, that presidential form of government being introduced and Erdogan himself becoming more stronger within. After the coup, he has been trying to consolidate his power. He has been trying all along. Earlier, the Islamic element of it was gaining him enough popularity, and it was a kind of Islamic populism that he represented. Now he wanted more to be known as a strong leader of the country, in this sense, almost in the way Kemal Atatürk himself was. So it is when the prime ministership is abolished, when the presidential powers become so stronger, he has control over most of the affairs of the country. That's not divided along now. You will have more parliamentary seats, around 600 now. There is a kind of dissipation of that kind of power. And younger people can come in. The referendum meant that the age of contesting elections were made into 18. And then you have the popularity of Erdogan in the countryside. The cities voted, the major cities, Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir, voted against the referendum. So the no vote was coming from. The yes vote was coming from traditional places of Erdogan's support. But then it's a far dwindled support, as we know. It's 51 point something.
Sure.
So this may be the slightest margin that he might have got in any of the recent elections earlier and now with the referendum.
You know, Professor's talking about a slightest margin, WAIEL Awwad. Does this mean a more divided Turkey going forward? You know, the secularists as well as the young-minded Westerners are now going to go against the rule of Erdogan.
Well, with respect to the referendum itself, it is an internal matter of the Turkish government or the Turkish people to divide them among the lines of whether yes or no. But the fact of the matter remains that the democracy in Turkey will be suffering at this hand of a fraction. Voting, because if we look at the voting and the percentage he got, despite the fact that there was lots of allegation of a fraud, of allegation of putting unstamped paper, valid paper inside, and all this allegation has been there, yet it has not created more than 55.2 or 52.5. So if that is the referendum result, that means that we are heading for more political instability in Turkey rather than we are heading for more stability. What Erdogan was trying to tell his people that he is going to give them, promising them that more job, more stability, no coups, nothing. Actually, he is consolidating the power in his hand. If he survives a next military coup or he survived that age, we may see him till 2029. If that is the issue, then the country is heading for more trouble. And as Professor Ramakrishnan was saying, he lost the three major cities, and the three major cities are usually used to be supporter of his policy. Now, if that is the tendency among the city, including the Kurd, who have already voted against the referendum, and the opposition party, that I think he is heading for more trouble inside the country, despite the fact he also gagged all the media, gagged the opposition, jailed the maximum number of journalists in the history of Turkey, and put all the academicians inside jail who ever been against his own policy. We are heading for a kind of the 30s, where we see Hitler and Mussolini that time, where they have created their own dictatorship system, and after which we had the Second World War. If that is the tendency in Turkey, I think Turkey will be heading for more trouble. Europe may be watching carefully and cautiously, but Europe is tapping at his back because they are worried that he may go in the arm of the Russian. They don't want him to go in the arm of the Putin as long as he's a member of NATO. So I think the situation in Turkey coming months, because they may call for an early election, they may call for a kind of fighting with debate because he doesn't have the two majority in the parliament. What is going to happen in Turkey now? We have to watch and see what Erdogan is having in mind set to do, and what will be the opposition taking the case into the street.
Okay, fair enough. Professor Mahajan, this particular vote ensures that Erdogan gets executive powers that have been unseen or unheard of in Turkey since the 1980s, when the military was in power. So he has the power now to do a lot, doesn't he?
I completely agree with you. In fact, I'd like to take you back a little, given that I'm a historian. So from an earlier perspective, people are comparing this referendum and the powers that it has given Erdogan to, in fact, the founder of modern Turkey, to Kemal Atatürk, is being invoked. And I think that is a complete travesty that, I think what's happening today is that this extension of powers under the guise of a crisis that Turkey is facing today because of the refugee problem and because of the failed military coup last July, that there is a kind of emergency situation in which a presidential system a la France or a la the United States of America is something which is warranted. So I think this is completely wrong, and it's very clearly that what's happening is in a country which is so close to us, historically speaking, and shares a huge history and very many traditions. I mean, we in India had very close relations with and drew on the tradition of Atatürk. Till today, there are large numbers of Indians who connect with Rumi, for example. That's another great syncretic tradition that we connect with. And now to have Turkey in this situation, really being a pawn, as it were, in the European diplomatic game, where they are, they really tried to make Turkey the fall guy when it came to the whole Syrian crisis and the fallout in terms of the refugees. And, in a way, I think, world diplomacy or European diplomacy was really asking for what's happening.
Sure. What does this mean for India, Ambassador? I mean, these kind of powers, is anything going to change between the relations between India and Turkey now going forward?
Well, there are two aspects. One is Turkey's relations with India, and the other one is Turkey is now presenting one kind of Islamic governance model. India has been studying the Islamic governance models in various Islamic countries, whether Indonesia under Abdul Wahid, Malaysia, under various governments. So India was always feeling that maybe some kind of a syncretic relationship among different communities inside the country and not going only for Islamic foundations, perhaps would help a country like India, where there are different communities living together. As far as Turkey's relations with India are concerned, yes, India has marked for a long time Turkey as one of the key countries close to Europe and close to West Asia, which should be cultivated in order to influence developments in these regions. But anyway, I think the point remains that Turkey itself has been playing in such a faulty fashion, shifting from the Western alliance and supporting in some ways the various anti-Bashar al-Assad's factions, to the extent that many of them were, selling their oil to Turkey and making money on that. And then they also shot down a Russian plane. Then finally they moved across and started befriending Putin's Russia. So therefore, I think the Indians have to be mindful of what is going on in Europe and West Asia, because there's complete chaos at the moment. India does not want, as many of these people who have been attacked in West Asia by the American forces, some of them are moving to South and Southeast Asia. And India has to be very careful. It has to firstly keep in touch with all the actors in the West Asia theater, and at the same time see that in Afghanistan and Pakistan on our western side, and Bangladesh and further other countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, etc., or even Myanmar, that we do not have bases which can then start destabilizing us.
Sure.
So that is the other thing which we have to keep in mind in our relationship with Turkey.
Indeed, fair enough. As far as Europe is concerned, Professor Ramakrishnan, Europe will be closely watching everything that's happening in Turkey, because it has a direct impact on what happens in Europe. And as far as the EU membership for Turkey is concerned, after this now, can we write it off? Because he's already talking about reimposing the death penalty and several of those other measures. That means clearly that Europe will not accept it.
I think joining the European Union, that whole effort that he himself has initiated in the initial phases, bringing Turkey closer to the Copenhagen criteria, that kind of reforms that Turkey has undertaken, that did not pay off. And there was rejection of Turkish identity as something that's blocking the European Union membership, which Turkey did not take very lightly. And you could see that focus on Asia coming up in a bigger manner once this was very clear. This is not something very new, not over the last few months or anything of that sort. So the Turkish identity itself as a major question. Professor Mahajan was mentioning about the problem of comparing between the Ataturk and Erdogan. I agree. But then the question is, there is an unsettled nature of this authority. What is Turkish identity now? Whether the old secular Ataturk kind of Turkish national identity, whether it's the Islamic identity, or the neo-Ottoman kind of larger empire kind of thing, where Erdogan wants to have some hold on all of these elements, even though the secular elements are against him, voting against him, and so. But they were together with him when the coup happened, because they did not want the democratic fabric to be totally undone. But then what is happening now is consolidation of power in one person, which has lots of resemblance with earlier forms of government in Turkey, from Ataturk onwards.
Sure.
So once this happens, obviously, European Union is worried. Already, the election campaign, etc., was a major issue in several European countries, in Germany, in the Netherlands, and everywhere. And then bringing, as you have mentioned, the whole agenda of death penalty and so on. That simply means that there is an attempt, the ongoing kind of streaks of concentration of power being exerted further into various other realms. You could also see that with the kind of journalists and academicians and others being targeted.
Yes, the purges after the coup d'etat. Yeah.
But then one can also see, along with it, various kinds of shifting of forces, the politico-economic forces, the class shift from traditional Turkish elements to his own supporters earlier, in which religious elements also played a role.
Sure.
But which turned against him, the coup and other things, the debates on that. So this simply means then that, and with the threat of military challenging the authority. So in order to manage everything, the need for more concentration of power is felt by him, and he is doing that.
Sure. The professor spoke about purges while Awwad. As far as the secularists, as far as the Kurds are concerned, and several of the other people, of course, the 48% of people who voted against the referendum, do they have cause for concern now going forward?
Well, everybody having cause of concern. In fact, not only the people of Europe, the people of Turkey, the people in the neighboring countries, actually consolidating power in the hand of one man, which we know that he's an ideologist, making worries because he's also party to the Islamophobia created in Europe. Actually, because people in Europe and the United States were looking at the justice parties as a kind of a moderate symbol of a symbol kind of a model that to be implemented in other Arab country. And instead of seeing the Arab Spring, we saw winter there actually, a bloody winter that we have Arabs that they have suffered at their hand, and the alternative was the Muslim Brotherhood. So if that is the attitude within the Erdogan mind, then we have a matter of concern to us to be worried about his future approach to the crisis, because he started with zero problem with the neighbor to a problem with all the neighbors. And now the Kurd itself, when he was putting his hand with the American to regime change in Syria, in fact, he realized that he was taking for a ride, because the American have separate agenda for the Kurd within the Syrian small geographical area that they want to give them an autonomous body, where he felt that if that is given to them, that will have a big harm and demographic impact on the future of Turkey integrity. So therefore, he wanted to make sure that this doesn't happen. And now he realized later in the stage that American have already insisted on this part. He lost Mosul because he had always eyes on the Mosul, but now he's also losing Raqqa, losing part of Syria. And the Kurd also understood that the pressure from the American and pressure from Erdogan, that they should not be having any saying in the future. Having said that, I wouldn't say that the future of Turkey integration is going to be for a long. With such kind of polarization within the Turkish society that Erdogan is trying now, in fact, that will be what we used to call him 5-6 years ago, Pakistan in the making, where he opened his border with the terrorists and the infrastructure in between our Syria and Turkey, 950 kilometers, and allow these people, and you have more than 16,000 ISIS cadre from Turkish origin. And then you have to think now why Europe is worried, because Europe, if he start putting his eyes on the Balkan or putting his eyes on some other part of the old Ottoman, then people will be seeing him as the de facto Khalifa, where he is projected himself as the new Ottoman Empire. And in fact, if you look at when he was sworn as the president himself, he removed the picture of Ataturk behind him, and he put Muhammad al-Thani, who was the last sultan of Turkey, that he put his picture behind him as his god or as his guru. So if that is the attitude within the Turkish mindset of Erdogan, then I think everybody have something to worry about it.
Fair enough. Professor Mahajan, Turkey, we've seen time and again, and history also has shown us that is strategically extremely important, and more so now because of what's happening in West Asia and Central Asia. Is that something that Erdogan understands, and that's why he's being brazen?
I think so. I think the strategic element is very, very important. I mean, right from the time of the Balkan crises in the 19th century, and of course now, I mean, there is a sense in which it's only a visit to Istanbul and to Turkey which makes you realize how much it is literally on the cusp between Asia and Europe, and not just in a geographical sense and strategic sense, but in a cultural and political sense, because Turkey is also, in a very fundamental sense, today poised, like our country and many others, on this cusp between modernity and tradition, and also a contest between secular and fundamentalist religious forces. And I think it's this entire combination, that so many contests happening all encapsulated in such a short period of time, in a way creating this kind of explosive situation, almost like a pressure cooker sort of situation that we see. So many things happening. And then on top of it, as you rightly said, you have this geographical location, and not just the geographical location, but you have Turkey poised between NATO on the one side and Putin on the other, as we were just reminded. And also Turkey has really been buffeted, It's not as if a lot of it was of its own making, but because of this strategic location, it has been, historically, it has really been buffeted in the storms that have hit Europe and Asia. And that's really been a huge, big problem. On a visit that I had made, in fact, interestingly, right after the bombing in about April, and then and then another visit I made last year in July, I think shortly before or just after the failed coup. And the sense of dismay among the young students whom I was interacting with in the university at Marmara was so strong, because there was such a sense that we've almost made it to Europe in a crucial sense. I don't mean physically, but Turkey was on the path to modernity, to being accepted at the high table of Europe. It was part of the European Union. And now this is it's almost like a body blow.
Sure.
So,
indeed. Let's take the discussion forward and talk about Erdogan and the trouble he might face. Quick closing comments from all my guests. Ambassador, all's not well in Turkey, and we know that because of the kind of terrorist attacks that happened there. Also, Turkey is facing a major economic crisis as well. Now, these are some things that he'll have to deal with going forward if he wants to keep his popularity above the 52% that he has just recently won in the referendum.
Yeah, quite right. I think from both the angle of the majority support which he seems to have received, this majority may become really a razor-thin majority, because as all these court cases are taken up by the opposition, and also all the vote tallies are finally counted, we may find that there is some kind of a more instability in Turkey. Secondly, if we keep in mind what Professor Samuel Huntington had written long time ago about the traditional fault lines, then Turkey was considered the main case where the fault lines will be at some stage cause schism among the different people, different communities.
Sure.
And this is, I think, Erdogan has a certain agenda which he is playing according to his own script. But as Professor Sucheta Mahajan said, that the young people feel cheated. And I think even though he is trying to reduce the voting age and the election age, but what it would mean ultimately, would he go the same way as the Pakistanis went, and they said, look, if anybody studies in a madrasa, that would be treated like a university education also, or something like this. So I think what he is doing is playing a very dangerous game.
Right.
And India has to watch it very carefully, because many scholars feel that the seeds of India's partition was made when we did not study Turkey properly and thought that we should support a caliphate under Mahatma Gandhi's leadership here.
Fair enough. And Professor Ramakrishnan, as far as the economy is concerned, that is something that he'll have to deal with as soon as possible, because otherwise the people are going to take to the streets.
Yeah, that has been a major issue. Many protests have happened earlier, and the government has to deal with some of those protests with heavy hand. But I don't think that Turkey is a case where, in spite of its identity questions that I was pointing out earlier, these are questions of division along the kind of national division. It's a question of how the leadership imagines the nation to be. On that question, there are issues, and various political parties and their ideologies do not agree with one single identity for Turkey. So in that kind of a situation, when you have, as I've already pointed out, economic actors have been shifting over a period of time. The new support base that Erdogan himself could get, it also helped Turkey to democratize further.
Sure.
It's not Islam versus democracy or anything of that kind in the Turkish case. What is important at this juncture is that all those democratic gains that Turkey has made, if some way of, instead of sustaining that and furthering it, what is happening now is a way of consolidating power
Indeed.
at the top.
Indeed.
That is the question.
WAIEL, Awwad, the Syrian refugee crisis, is it something that is going to really hurt Erdogan in the near future?
Well, no, it's a creation of his own. Actually, he created this refugee crisis. I remember when immediately after the crisis started in Syria in 2011, he built up 350,000 tents in the border of Syria, where we only had 45 members of our families of rebels fighting in Idlib. So therefore, he knew what was the plan, because he's using the Syrian refugee as a blackmail token against the European, that if you don't, I will open the flux of the refugees, let them come to you. Otherwise, he is just using for the consolidating himself. I think what we are going to watch and see a fight between a fundamentalism and a secularism. And that is what is going to have the long impact on the future democracy of Turkey. Because what we are seeing now of Erdogan doing is actually he is consolidating within the Islamist movement in his ideas.
So massive protests is what we can see in the near future, is what we're talking about.
Well, you never know. He can consolidate his power. He can gag the opposition. He can remove them. He got the money. He can do anything. He can do how much he can survive. And let us remind the viewers as well, Europe will never accept a strong Turkey in ailing Europe. That's a message. And if that is if he doesn't understand the visionary for the future of Turkey, I think he is leading them into the well.
Oh, fair enough. Professor Mahajan, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Well, I think that in India, we need to be wary of what's happening. I think this whole idea of a big leader and huge consolidation of power, which we have been, I think, unfortunately, we might also be moving in a somewhat similar direction if we look at the recent victories that they've been in the last round of elections in the States. And I think what Turkey, for me as a historian, is a sort of lesson, because I think we are a society which is also a fragile democracy in a sense, despite the huge majoritarian victories that we've had. But still there is a fragility, because we're a newly minted colony. 70 years is not that long. Again, fragility in terms of an economic development, in terms of threats from our neighbors, we're not that different. And I think what's happening in Turkey, if we hold it up as a mirror, as like, this is not where we want to go at all. And I think that would be something that I would at least take away from this, a kind of further commitment to building a kind of pluralistic, India, because and Turkey, because sort of look to Turkey along those lines. And personally, I do have some optimism as far as Turkey also goes.
Okay, on that optimistic note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Sucheta, Mahajan, Shashank, A.K.Ramakrishnan and WAIEL, Awwad, thank you so much for joining me in the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.